Okay, everyone, we're going to get started. But before we get started, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to our sponsors for this week. Startup Week is brought to you by the companies on either side of this stage. One in particular is M Accounting. They provide outsourced accounting and CFO services to small and mid-sized companies. A fun fact is that they've worked with dozens of startups across the tri-state and have recently hired a CFO for Cincinnati. So with that said, I'll let you guys take it from here.
All right, cool. Thanks everybody for being here. I know it's early for all of us. I think it's early, so I've been up in 2 years. So I just wanted to go and what the idea of this session is, you know, this is the second year in a row we've done it, is we kind of just like to get everybody that's really involved in the tech scene or, you know, been involved in the tech scene in Cincinnati or building really cool stuff together and just kind of having an open and honest conversation about what we're doing, how we're doing it, kind of what our ideals are, and just kind of have like just a powwow, I guess. So if you at any point in this you have questions or anything like that, feel free to ask us throughout the session. You know, at the end we'll also be open to questions. So first thing I want to do is just kind of kick it off with intros. My name is Jake Boyles. Currently I lead front engineering at Ahalogy / Quotient. So if you're unfamiliar with Ahalogy, we were a brandery company in 2011, I believe. And Jesse, give me a thumbs up back there. All right, so I got it right? Cool. All right, so 2011, then we were acquired by Quotient about a year and 10 months ago. So that's kind of where I'm at. And then I'll let each one of these guys kind of walk through, introduce themselves, and talk about what they've done. Aaron, you want to start?
I get this one. My name is Aaron Brongersma. I am a cloud solutions architect for VMware. My previous life, I was head of engineering at Navistone, a startup that's actually sitting right behind us, in the building behind us behind there. And I was head of engineering at Astronomer for a while as well. And I was also proud enough to be a part of the team at Modulus. So I've been around in the engineering world for a while. Now I'm helping the VMware team bring new products to market from an enterprise standpoint. So though we're a successfully public IPO'd startup, you know, it still has challenges trying to bring new products to market, and that's what I'm focused on.
Hi, my name is Kat Fairbanks. I'm currently a senior software engineer at FlowSpace doing warehousing solutions. Before this, I was head of engineering at Known Decimal, a consulting company working with e-commerce brands. And before that, I was director of engineering at Everything But the House. So I've done a lot of consulting, working on products as well. So I've had a lot of different experiences working with companies just starting up and then also building more mature software.
Morning, my name's Carl Morand. I'm Director of Engineering at Coterie. We're an API-based insurtech startup. Prior to that, I have a lot of experience contracting and consulting with various startups, mostly doing front-end work. Before that was at Family Tech as a front-end engineer, and before that spent a couple years in the Army doing various infantry things.
My name's Nate Denlinger. I'm currently VP of Software Engineering at a company here in Cincinnati called SmartLink. Before that, I've worked at a couple different Cincinnati companies, Market Vision, InfoTrust, eSoft Planner, a couple different ones, different roles.
Brian Powell. I am currently consulting, but prior to that I was with a company called Tangram Flex based out of Dayton, and then was with Complete Set, and then Strap that came out of the brandery as well. So.
All right, cool. So one of the first categories I want to kind of cover with you guys is hiring. I know it's kind of a struggle we all have gone through, or at least talked about. And one of the things that I kind of find interesting is I was sitting up at ComSpark on Tuesday, which if you're unfamiliar with ComSpark, basically 1,400 people, more definitely not the startup scene, more like the bigger Fortune 500 companies, you know, Fifth Thirds. All of them, they had a CTO panel kind of just like this with a lot of the big Fortune 500 companies, and one of the things that they kept talking about was hiring problems. So it's not just here within the startup scene that we're seeing it. It's definitely within, you know, the big co's, and we're all competing with them and hiring. So one of the first questions I guess I have for you guys is, what is your hiring strategy? What do you do to go out and find talent in the past? Like, what is, I guess, your go-to for just getting people in the door to get and talk to and kind of be able to convince them to come work for, one of the smaller to mid-market companies over a, let's say, Kroger, P&G, that sort?
So for me, a big part of hiring is just you need to be doing it early and all the time. You can't wait until you have a need to decide, okay, let's start having conversations and hiring. And a big part of it is having a culture and a team where the people who already work for you want to go out and evangelize for your organization, and that they're out in the community sort of saying good things and positive things about what it's like to work for you. And I think for me, especially as it relates to like hiring against Kroger or P&G or them, from an engineering side, I think some people look at organizations like that and they think that's a stable job and I can go work for them. It's a stable paycheck. I don't have to worry about a startup going under. And from my perspective as an engineer, your job stability is in your skill set and what you can bring to a team, not the company you're at. So a startup can go under, but I think I imagine we're all the same, that like if you look at our like LinkedIn inbox, it's just a billion people trying to reach out to you and have a conversation. So I try and have those conversations around your stability and ability to be successful isn't just the big company you're at. It's what you can do and what you can bring to the table.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much you got to network in any engineer that you want to pull out of someplace, right? So, but typically, in terms of pitching against like a big co, I'll usually sell hard on the, you're not just going to do one specific thing. Like I actually want you to do a lot of things for the team, right? And so, it's not just getting like front-end dev work, right? It may be, starting to work with APIs, learning how to build backends, and starting to become more of a full stack developer.
So one of the biggest challenges I've run into, and it seems to be recurring at every startup, is cash flow has a lot to do with this, right? And we talk about hiring and like, oh, we're looking for good talent, but in Cincinnati, you're waiting for the next pocket of engineers to decide to migrate from their last project, right? I mean, Brian, we've experienced this where I had an engineer working for me. His name is Ken Herner. He's over at Navistone now. But Ken has worked with me at 3 companies. Shad's in the back here. I've been at a couple companies with Shad. You're waiting for your next migratory herd of engineers to decide to make a move. And if you don't have cash earmarked for your startup to strike while the iron is hot, you've missed it. So when you're planning to hire your next 2 to 3 engineers, you wait. Maybe you can't. Maybe you shouldn't rush to get that first engineer's resume that comes in the door, and you go, oh, we got to get this one because this is the first one that's answered us, or this is the first one that's responded. You got to be prepared that in the next 6 to 9 months you're going to find a pocket of engineers or it could be one, it could be your unicorn, right? But you have to be ready that if you're out there having these conversations with people and trying to entice them to come to your company, when they come and say yes, you better have money to write them the check, or you've missed your opportunity. So be ready to send an offer as soon as possible.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing as far as you're not going to find an engineer that's just sitting around without a job. That's not going to happen in our current marketplace. So, I mean, for me, I've been going to like meetups for the last like 7 years, developing relationships, networking, and having a lot of times a specific person or 2 or 3 people in mind as the company grows. Like, hey, most likely these are the people I'm going to come and ask before we even have to, try to, do a whole like job applicant process, and trying to find people that might not have ever even heard of you or anything like that, because it's going to be hard to find anyway. So yeah, networking and having some of those conversations with people long before the money is there or the role is even ready, getting a feel for it, asking them, hey, when the time comes, are you interested in coming here? Are you interested in making a move? What would it take to make that move and stuff like that?
Yeah, and I've found it helpful for me to just figure out where they're wanting to go in their career and see what I can do and what my company can do to help them get there, and kind of tell that story to help get them excited. Tell the story of the problems that we're solving in our day-to-day jobs to get them excited, because I find that you can make really big impact at a smaller company and get to do some really cool things, and that can attract engineers.
Yeah, it's really good points. So next, Joe.
So we've had interns, and yeah, like obviously if we have a good intern, they're already, we're small enough that we're not going to put them on garbage jobs. Like they're actually going to be working on like live, production code and stuff like that. So if we find a good intern, like absolutely, like experience is everything. I always tell developers the hardest job to get is your first job. After that, like you'll have recruiters contacting you all the time. So once you get that first job, your life becomes so much easier. So if you can do some internship, like start building up that experience is, worth its weight in gold.
So I'm going to put this down as the traditional don't at me on this, but if you're a young startup, you can't afford to nurture your engineers. Personal opinion, right? You have a very limited runway, and in that runway, you need to make some real hard decisions on whether or not you can level up an intern to a junior engineer, if you can take a junior engineer to a mid-level, a mid-level to a senior. If you're 3 to 5 people working in a basement or working in a tiny office, that might be a stretch to try to level up your engineer. But you should always be looking for incredible talent, right? Like there are some people that, they'll leave their job, they leave work at the end of the day and they go home and they've read the latest tutorial on what's going on in React. Those are the kind of people you want to pick up. But I think, teaching someone to code while you're there, while you're working on your startup, I mean, that doesn't advance your MVP, right? And that's a tough pill to swallow. I think that I've been at a couple of companies where we thought that we could take some junior talent and level them up. And what we found is that we spent a lot of time, where we had 3 heads doing the role of one good senior engineer. And it's like, I would have rather had that senior engineer. And that may have affected the run rate of the company and whether or not we were successful or not. So, like I said, it's, personal preference, but I think there's some challenges early on that you can't afford those things.
Yeah, I think one of the things that people forget about when they're hiring junior engineers is like, it's not just about implementation, right? It's about technical debt. It's about all of the decisions that you're hiring someone to make when they're actually implementing and putting something down and designing a solution. So if you're bringing in that junior and then you've got a senior who has to come in now and help sort of nurture that, plus go back and fix things, plus you end up with technical debt in the product, which you're going to have to pay later, right? Like all of that just accumulates. So like, the price tag may be expensive in the beginning, but like if you're thinking about, the actual product getting done correctly, you probably should spend a little bit more money on somebody who's senior and brings a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, so I mean, talking on our experience with that a little bit. So I was third engineer on our team. I think our 5th hire, right, was intern. So we had 2 interns that came on. We've hired both of them. They've done great. But the reason that was, I guess, would be progressive for us or worked for us is because we were at that point, like you guys are saying, where we'd already got a VP. We know we already got it, and then we could bring them in and develop them. And one of the things is just finding good interns. Like we had a few that weren't that good, to be honest, but we had 2 that were actually awesome. So I think it's just spending a little bit more time in interviewing the interns maybe. It's just not just be like, hey, this is the first person that's coming, I'm going to hire them. Getting to actually know them and understanding like what they can do and what their interests are. Because there is interns that can really just come in and like surprise you right away. And you want to, we have a few that we've been like, hey, like don't finish school, come work for us.
Yeah, that interview process is key, right? So I'll share what the interview process I've used now for 4 companies. And so what we would do is we would do an initial screen, and then we'd bring them in, right? And we'd bring them in, and we'd have a task for them that would take about 3 hours for them to implement. and then we'd make them, join morning stand-up so that they could meet everybody, and then we'd sit them down to start that task, and then I'd strategically send every 15 minutes one of my engineers over to interrupt them so that they were actually like dealing with the pace of the office, right? And we'd take them out to lunch, and then and then in the afternoon they presented what they basically built, right? And it was up to them to sort of, walk us through the decisions that they made and understanding, because they had to demonstrate that A, they understood the task that they were doing, but B, that they could communicate with the team back what they had actually implemented.
No, that's really good.
Yeah, I'd say when I'm especially looking at younger talent, I'd say I always am trying to look to see where they're going to be in 2-3 years. It's just like sports or anything else. Like, you can't teach a guy to throw 100 miles per hour, but you can teach him to throw a strike. I have a baseball background, so that's the way I think about it. So, like, you can't teach passion. You can't teach, somebody who's a self-starter or self-learner. But you can teach them, if they already know JavaScript, you can teach them another language. So I always try to look for the characteristics, like the things that are core to them that you can't really teach. So, like having that passion, like going in there with, hey, here's some side projects I've done on my own. Like, I just wanted to learn this. Like, that's everything to me. Like, that shows me that you're going to be somebody who like wants to learn. And like they've talked about, like, when you're a startup, you don't have a whole lot of time to mentor, even though you wish you could. So you need to be able to, like, even with a junior developer, like, hand them a project and be like, go figure it out. Like, do the best you can, and if you get stuck, come back. But it's that balance between, self-starting and then also, getting mentorship and stuff.
All right, so next question I got is, let's say, I'm sure there's people watching at home that are, maybe they're at UC, maybe they're in KU, maybe they're at Miami, that are, in junior, senior level, or juniors or seniors in college, and they're coming to look into getting into career. What would be your best advice to them coming straight out of college? Maybe they're coming out of a boot camp, maybe they're in Tech Elevator, maybe they're in Max. What would be your best advice to them to say, like, how do you get involved in the scene? What would you tell them to start doing now to prepare for when they're done?
I think, he just touched on it, right? Like, side projects. Like, for me, any developer I've hired out of college, I didn't care anything about their schoolwork and, like, their coursework. I was like, show me what you're building on the side, right? Show me the hackathons you've been to. Show me that you actually have a desire to continue to learn and grow, right? And that to me is, like, probably the biggest piece of advice. I remember looking at, I hired someone, and I basically put their resume on the side, and he wanted to talk about his resume, and I was like, I don't care, right? I was like, at all. I was like, I want to, like, tell me what side project you were building, and he was building a ESPN app that he had won second place with, and an Android app, and I was like, done, like, you're hired, type of deal, so.
Yeah, I know when I was early in my career, a big thing that helped me was just go to every meetup you can, go to every event, things like this. Just get out in the community and meet people, because it's so much easier to show your passion and interest in development, having a conversation with somebody, than just sending your resume over. That's just not going to come across. They're not going to have that interest. But if they can shake your hand and have a conversation with you and just see in your eyes like you really love this stuff and you have a passion to learn and you're really hungry for the job, that will come across in a face-to-face meeting with people.
Yeah, and if it's hard to get out, like, I know I didn't have a car in college, and it wasn't like it was easy. I didn't know about meetups at the time even, so there's online networks that we're all a part of, like, we're all talking to each other either on Twitter, on Slack, or something like that. Just trying to get your name out there so people are thinking of you when it comes time to hire is important.
I think that's one area, especially colleges have kind of failed developers. I had a minor in graphic design, and every, like, graphic artist or anybody with, like, an art degree that comes out of college, when they graduate, they have a huge portfolio of all the work they've done during college. And literally when they go in for an interview, like anywhere, they take this huge portfolio and they can show them, like, font faces, they can show them art, like paintings, drawings, all kinds of stuff. And I feel like kids come out of college with a computer science degree, and they literally have, like, nothing to show. So I think that's one area, like, if you know anybody in education, work on, like, building a portfolio. Like, I don't know how we can get that into our education system, but if kids could come out of college, like, come into us with, even like a GitHub repo, like, here's all the projects I've worked on during school, or, the projects that I've worked on my own. Like that's everything. Like just like with art, we want to see what you've done, what you've actually written. So that to me is like huge. Like if you can come to me with, here's all the stuff I've worked on, and I can actually look at the code and see the commits you've made, like that's everything.
So I don't have a traditional developer background. I started as an infrastructure engineer, so I like hardware. Hardware makes sense to me. Software actually still is very painful, and I have to deal with it every day. But one of the big pieces of that is early in my career, I struggled talking to other developers. I was the infrastructure platform for our critical business applications, and developers would come to me and they'd go, the SQL server's running slow. The hardware you're running on it is too old. You need to get new hardware for the SQL server. And enough of those conversations, enough of those meetings where you're ready to choke your developer, turned into me actually taking a boot camp to learn to code so that I could learn to speak the same language of the people whose problems I was dealing with. And I implore anyone that's in a software engineering field to take the time and look at some of the different, I would even say just tangential areas that you could be in. If you're an engineer, think about what product marketing does. When you've built your magic app that solves, the world's problem, how do you position that in front of a new set of customers? How do you go to market with that? Think about talking to your finance team so you understand how much your cloud spend every month affects the underlying business. As you start understanding more about, maybe it's your business, maybe it's a friend that's in finance that you can start understanding these things. Now you're able to start solving problems in finance, and you're writing finance apps. If you know about travel, or if you understand how GIS information works, now you're starting to position yourself in more of a specialist role. And I think there's a lot of people that come out as generalists, and I think we're looking for specialists too. Like I would love to find somebody that knows how networking works, right? Like not only can you write good code, but you also understand, I now know how underlying network fundamentals work, and I can write code against that set of problems. I'm looking for those kind of people that know a little bit more than just how to write good, clean code.
All right, so next question I have is, I want a one-word answer for this one. What is the hardest role that you have with hiring right now? The one job that you cannot hire in Cincinnati?
It's DevOps.
Okay, so we got cybersecurity and DevOps. Anything else? All right, so if you're a student watching this right now and you're at UC, you know what to focus on. All right, next question. So we're just move a little bit out of hiring. I want to get into product strategy. What is your guys' current strategy for planning out features, for planning out your roadmap, for looking at and kind of analyzing what your customers need or what your stakeholders need? How do you go about identifying that right now?
So right now we're using OKRs to help set big, wide objectives for the company. We're creating features to help meet those goals, but a lot of it's coming from customers and them telling us what they need, and we can't keep up with everything they want at this point. So it's
So we do 2-week cycles or sprints or whatever you want to call them. So what we do is we start sprints every other Monday. So the previous Thursday, we have what we call a dev priorities meeting, where it's me, the CTO, and then 2 of the sales leaders. And basically we have like a long running like feature development list of things that we've heard from customers and things internally. And basically every 2 weeks we reprioritize that and make sure that everything is in the right priority. And then when we get to the actual sprint planning, it's pretty easy because we just go based off of what is the highest priority. So we plan out tasks for 2 weeks.
I think you just got to be talking to your customers, right? Like, a lot of people will hold their product and be like, okay, it's not ready. And it's like, just get it out there, because customer feedback being put into that loop. immediately short circuits any gold plating of like, we need buttons for everything, and it's like, no, they want one button and that's it. But yeah, I mean, all the teams that I've run, we actually do sort of a pod approach where it's 8 weeks in a pod, and then 2-week sprints inside of it, 3-year implementation sprints, and then the 4th one is technical debt, and we'll use that for code cleanup and then future planning. And so we'll reevaluate every 2 months, what the priority set is, break down all of the large features for the next set of sprints.
So we also do OKRs and sprints. I think something that's really important for us is that we have lots of different stakeholders. As an insurtech company, we have our insurance product side, we have the customers we're talking to, we have people on the growth side working with potential partners. And so a big part of what we have to do is bring in all of those different sort of priorities and really take hard looks at, okay, what is important to do next? What's going to get us to the next critical milestone, whether that's a growth number or a fundraising number. And I think as on the engineering side, it's also important to be really humble and appreciate the fact that you don't have all the answers and that other people bring a lot of experience to the table and have a lot of great suggestions. And maybe you need to push back certain times or ask questions about what's the most feasible thing, but you need to appreciate that lots of other people know a lot about your domain and industry and really value their input.
For us, so the product that I'm on is massive. I have to work with our Dell counterparts for hardware. We have a site reliability engineering team that's based around the world. I have 3 or 4 business units that squash all together to make this magic sauce to build this MVP product to go out the door. And mission critical apps run on this. So I'm the antithesis of an MVP, but what I would say is that we have a list of goals for day 0, which would be like our initial availability. Like, does it turn on? Does it get on the internet? Can a customer run a workload on it? Like, that's day 0. Day 1 is like, can someone pilot this piece of equipment, this service, Can someone use it? Is it halfway usable, right? And then day 2 is it compliant? Will it pass the rigorous standards that we need? And we have to constantly shift priorities back and forth between those three goals. But I would say that, like, if you're building a new product, one of the big things too is spend the time to identify the market you're entering and know the vertical that you're entering. Don't enter all verticals at once. If you know that your product is lacking features, don't go enterprise, right? Like, if you can't do single sign-on or auth to Active Directory, don't go to enterprise. Like, you're going to swing and a miss. You're going to go hunting for whales, and you'll probably not get one. So focus on what your strengths of the feature set that you have is at that point in time. So you definitely have to align that to a vertical and a set of customers.
Mushaba.
Yeah, so we have quarterly OKR setting where the leadership team gets together and says, essentially, here's where we need to be 3 months from now. And we sort of take those higher level things and then just break them down into smaller and smaller chunks of, okay, what's it going to take to get us there, all the way down to, okay, what do we as a dev team need to be doing over the next 2 weeks that advances us to that ultimate goal. And then similarly, the leadership team also plans out 3-year, 5-year, longer term roadmaps, but the more concrete sense is in that 3-month OKR setting where we really look at tangibly, where does this business need to be 3 months from now to achieve whatever our next sort of milestone is.
We just have like a Google Sheets document that basically we put our like long-term epics in, and there's like 3 or 4 different criteria, and we try to quantify everything. So like maybe it's like user experience, there's all different criteria, and then so we try to score each thing from like 1 to 10, and then some categories have higher weight, and that helps take the emotion out of it for us, because some people they'll fight for something like, no, this is something that we have to have now. But then when you actually start quantifying it and like figuring out like, okay, this is only going to affect 10% of our user base, like here's something else that might affect 90%. it helps a lot to try to quantify. So that's what we do, is we constantly are evaluating those and trying to put numbers, actual numbers down, so that the list basically orders itself. So it's not a battle of who has the most say or who yells the loudest or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, you've heard OKRs like a lot, right? And at the end of the day, anything that's being implemented should align to an OKR. If it doesn't, then don't do it. It's real simple. So.
All right, next one I got is, how are you guys evaluating risk when launching these new products? Like, for us, we just launched a massive rewrite that we've been doing for 4 months. How are you evaluating a risk against ROI on that to determine if it's even worth doing or what the risks are? Like, let's say you go through, you do this 3-month project and it completely fails. What is the quantitative measures that you're taking to identify how risky this is and whether it's worth, getting in place?
So, do you know who my biggest competition is when I go sell a product? Do you guys know what your biggest competitor is? And I'm sure everybody goes, oh, well, we've done a ton of market analysis. My biggest competitor is Google, and if we only get 5% of Google, it's not Google. It's doing nothing, right? So it's determining so when your customer comes and looks at your product for the first time, it's not that they're evaluating against you or the competition. They're evaluating against whether they're going to add or increase that capability or bring that capability into their company or not, right? And that's a scary competitor to have. So when you start factoring in risk here, there is risk of entering new markets and overextending your runway. Whether you're gonna, we got to launch to 30 cities this year in order to hit the numbers that we need so that we can hit our next funding goal. Well, what if you launched to 5? Can you do it with 5 cities? Is there enough? Can you saturate? Or out of those 35 cities that you think that you want to go into, what are the best 5 of those? And I think that, we've seen this hyperscale, like this hyper growth of startups where, Uber will enter a market, they will, they'll carpet bomb the market with advertising and new drivers, and they'll incentivize everybody. Not every company is hyperscale, so we have to be very careful, especially in Cincinnati, with the money that we have and how we use it. And I think that risk factors into that, and making sure that you're very calculated what markets you want to enter or what features you want to bring to market, or even if you want to, if you want to delay a feature for 6 months until you get enough feedback from customers before you go live with it. So I think it's a huge, huge thing for bringing a new product to market.
Hey, Jake, I'm going to ask you a question now. What spurred the rewrite? Was it just painful? Like
architecture.
Okay.
Unscalable architecture. So
yep.
we known the business use cases going in, and they changed over time. So for us, it was more, when do we bite the bullet to build a solid foundation? And at that point was now, and it worked out well. So
yeah, we did a complete set right before we came out of Techstars. We did a full rewrite of everything, about killed our dev team, but we hit a date, right? But, same sort of deal, right? It was just, you start to realize that there are some flaws in what was there, and you've just got to bite that bullet and just make sure that you're ready to go for it. So.
All right, next one I got for you. This one's going to be a little more fun. You guys have all worked on some pretty cool shit, to put it honestly. So what is the coolest use case of a product that you have built, and can you describe it just a little bit?
I can go first because I have this project on my mind all the time. So at EBTH, one of the first projects I got to work on was help improving the photography process. And so what was going on is we were a estate sales site. We were taking multiple pictures of every single item that we were selling on our site every day. And so we've got maybe 5, 10 photographers just in Cincinnati.
Is the Electron app?
Yes, the Electron app.
Yeah, I just saw it last week. It's pretty cool.
Oh, cool. Yeah, so, and what they were doing was they had DSLRs, because we need good photos. They've got the tiny little screen, and they were uploading via the SD cards. They would plug them in, upload to the website in bulk, and kind of just sit around for 30 minutes, because it takes literally forever to upload hundreds of images, right? So what we ended up doing was building an Electron app that saw when photos were being taken, because they were dropped onto the computer on a folder. They could see them on a 24-inch screen, so we didn't get any more blurry photos. We could see if they got the right details and things like that, because serial numbers are super important to be readable on the site. And they were uploaded instantly. So there was no more waiting for SD cards to upload, no more downtime like that. And it actually ended up improving throughput. It doubled throughput. So it was cut times in half, and it kind of scaled the photography process on its own. And it was super important in gemology, where the little details were super important. They're taking pictures of these tiny stones, and it was pretty much not possible for us to do update our gemology process without this tool. So yeah, that was like 3 years ago, but it's still important to the business to this day. It was really cool.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I checked it out about a couple weeks ago. Back in 2010, I worked with Sony and Gracenote and we won CES with a project where we went in and we replaced Pepsi ads with Coke ads in Chicago. Basically, we had a whole real-time infrastructure for watching what was coming through the televisions, and then when that Pepsi ad went to play, we just played a Coke ad over top of it, and then we had all the consumer metrics and everything like that on top of it. And that literally sent the TV advertising industry into a tailspin after that CES. So that was like, we thought we were all great, and then interactive television never turned into anything.
So one of the coolest things I've worked on since being at VMware is there's a fairly large food processing company a little north of here. I can't tell you their name, but they process a lot of meat. And when the meat comes into their facility, it's wrapped in blue plastic. And they have some really interesting challenges around IoT, right? So they have a lot of sensors, but they have an unbelievable amount of cameras, and they're doing all of this video to monitor these manufacturing lines where they're, or these processing lines. And what they're looking for is the color blue, right? So the plastic that they wrap this meat in is blue, and that's the only time blue shows up in their entire processing line. And so what they had is they have all this video, and they've not been able to reduce the latency of processing the video, because if you pump the video up to the cloud, by the time you get it up into the cloud and you run it through your machine learning algorithm, and identify the color blue, you've already processed X number of thousands of pounds of food, right? And all of that is now contaminated, and you now have to throw it out, and it's a huge risk to their business. So what we've done is we actually enabled them with bringing our platform out for what we call heavy edge computing, where everybody loves to stick a Raspberry Pi somewhere, but what about putting high-powered compute right next to the manufacturing line or the food processing line? And that's exactly what we did. So now they're pumping their video directly into our platform, and running their own machine learning and AI. We don't get into that business part of it. We're a platform company, right? But they're now able to reduce that latency of, to seconds, right? They see blue on the line. It now sends an alert out to their IoT systems. It now pulls the emergency stop. The food is now stopped. They now throw out significantly less if they have a contamination on the line. And I thought that was one of the coolest things that I've seen recently from an IoT. That's like real world IoT to me, so.
I would say basically a lot of just everything we're doing at SmartLink, it's really cool just because a couple reasons. One, it's the first thing I've ever really worked on where I can take my family to Liberty Center or Newport and be like, hey, we built that. That's our software. It's being a software engineer, a lot of times you go home, if you talk to your kids or you talk to your wife, and it's hard to explain what you do, what you worked on. It's just not something they can ever tangibly see. So that's one really cool thing, and then also just a lot of edge stuff that we're doing that's kind of cutting edge, like indoor wayfinding and a lot of IoT stuff, camera sensors, being able to detect people walking by, and all the different stats that go with that, and trying to do dynamic ads, like if somebody walks by with a beard, throw up a beard shop ad, stuff like that. Just some stuff that's it's fun to play with new stuff. You know, while it's you know, you get to work on APIs and all that all the time, it's fun to mix in that learning part too and learn new things.
So I think the coolest thing I'm working on is what I'm working on right now, because buying business insurance as a small business owner or somebody in the gig economy just is a terrible experience. And I think what we're doing provides a social good by making it easier for a small business owner to get themselves covered and to take on bigger risks, because we take some of that risk off of them. And so for me, from a tech perspective, the stuff we're building to make it super easy for platforms to integrate with us, so that for somebody to get insurance, instead of it being multiple calls to a broker and having to try and get their certificate of insurance sent to them and just all that administrative hassle, it's a couple taps in an app that we make it super easy to integrate with our platform. So yeah, that's what I'm most excited about.
Awesome. All right, so we're running a little bit out of time, so I got two more good things I want to ask you guys. One is, I think we've all experienced, you know, the multitude of LinkedIn messages saying, hey, I've got this idea I want to do. Will you come join me as a tech co-founder or CTO or some sort of that? What is the kind of the requirements that you have or would have for going and leaving your job and joining somebody that has this idea, I guess? What is the things that you're looking at to put your faith into another person to lead you in that direction?
So for me, the idea is great, but they have to have a tangible path forward. There has to be some way to, how are you going to take this from idea to something that's actually in the market and is a real tangible product that people can use? Lots of people have ideas, but unless you have a path forward to execute it, it's sort of meaningless to me.
Yeah, I mean, you can build anything, right? Should you build it is the question, right, that you need to ask. You know, for me, it's usually convince me you can sell it, right? Like, you know, I don't want to, after I've built it or be in the process of build it, have to go out and help you sell it. Like, I need that counterpart to be out focusing on revenue and focusing on making sure that the business works, because, you know, largely that, you know, the CTO, especially in a large company, is sort of that first internal housekeeper of, you know, what's going on inside of the organization, right? CEO is very forward-facing, you know, out there representing the business, trying to drive sales, trying to drive the message of what, you know, what the team's building, right? And so, you know, you've got to have faith that, you know, what's going on externally is going to translate into internal results as well. So,
I like compelling events. So why now, right? Like Coterie, you've got some fun, compelling events, right? Like Kevin Mackey's out here, so but that is a reason to join a startup, to build a startup, right? Like, is it a change in legal requirements? Is it a change in, like, are you riding the crest of a wave? A good comparison was like Docker, right? Docker happened and everybody's like, wow, well, it was the perfect time for Modulus to ride the crest of that wave, right? Like, we were built on containers, Docker comes out, hey, we run on Docker too, let's just ride on into the sunset with that, you know? And you have to be able to read those opportunities. I also think that, you know, if you're not a technical co-founder, you have to spend the time to seek to understand your technical co-founders. Why would somebody want to walk away from the stable 9-to-5 job to take on that risk? It's got to be, you know, for some people those triggers are social good. For some people it's the opportunity to, you know, some people are financially motivated, right? Like we all are in some capacity. You know, for others it's, you know, impact. You know, can this product make an impact? Can we move the needle in whatever metrics we're doing? But what the things that are always the worst of I don't know if you guys see the same LinkedIn things, but it's always Facebook for X or LinkedIn for X. You know, it's like Twitter for cats. Like if I have to build another Twitter for cats, all right, I'm done. You know, like, but I think that, like, you know, a lot of founders think that their idea, you know, is the greatest idea, and you know, we're in such a positive environment where we always talk up everybody, and we're like, that's a great idea, but we're very shy from giving negative feedback, and not in a talking people down, but saying, have you considered, you know, the ramifications of entering this market? You know, how would you know, how long would it take for you, and how many customers would you need to be worth $1 billion? you know? And I think that like those questions don't get asked enough, and I think that people do a good job of juking those questions as a founder now, and I think we need to be better as a community to help guide people down those paths of saying, you know, do you need $1 billion $1 a month customers? Well, all right, well, that's what we've got to go do. Like, do we have 1 billion potential customers, you know? Or, so I think that's one of the big pieces for me, is the financial metrics of it.
I'd say, first of all, for me, either I probably need to have already met you and trust you, or somebody has to vouch for you. Like, if I just get a random message from somebody on LinkedIn that I don't know, I'm obviously not going to, like, fully trust them in any way, shape, or form, really, until I get to know them. So it would definitely be, like, if they do want to just like go and have coffee and get to know each other first, then possibly. But yeah, I'm not going to do anything with somebody I don't trust or somebody that can't vouch. But then product validation is everything. One of the best examples I've ever heard is the guy who built WP Engine, which is like a site for like setting up WordPress sites. He actually went and got like 10 different customers to sign $1,000 checks, so that he's like, I don't have the product yet, here's what I'm going to build. So like, if you can go out and verify like, hey, I've talked to these customers, they're willing to pay X amount. They were even willing to write me checks, like you can't cash them until the product's done. But like, for me, it's, yeah, people have good ideas all the time, and I even might think it's a good idea, but one thing I've learned over the years is it doesn't matter whether I think it's a good idea, the market has a completely different idea of what good ideas are not. So you can build something that you think is awesome, and you know, there's every reason it should be like an awesome company that should, you know, grow, and you should make tons of money, and you can't even get a single person to sign up.
Me and you have spent some hours
yeah, so
looking at that.
yeah, and that failed on both parts on that one, both product validation and trusting somebody we shouldn't have. So yeah, I would say make sure you know, pre-qualify both the people you're going to work with and the product.
All right, last one here I have is, I think it's going to be the hardest one. What is the biggest failure regret in your career?
Wow. Yeah, so when I was building 2007, 8, and 9, some of the interactive television stuff, I made a really terrible deal with an angel investor. And I was young, you know, in my entrepreneurship career, and it was one of the things where you give someone a little bit too much power over an organization. And I think, like, you know, when you lose the checks and balances of sort of, you know, of startups, right? Or you're young and you're, you know, I felt too much in love with a product, right, that I wanted to build, and I was willing to accept terms just to be able to go get the opportunity to build that. And so I've always sort of, whenever I step into those things again, you always sort of have to give it a, like, okay, like, am I actually thinking logically here, or am I just really fucking excited to go build this product? So
I'd say, yeah, going back to what I just talked about, just being too trusting, especially when you're young. You know, get things in writing, especially when you're building like side products. You know, it's, you know, everything when, you know, when you come back 9 months later and you've spent a bunch of time on this, and, you know, the person basically is like, well, we don't have anything in writing. Like, you don't own anything technically yet, because I don't agree that the MVP is done, and we said that you get your ownership when the MVP is done, or something like that. You know, get everything in writing, get everything like detailed out. What does that MVP consist of? Like, everything. Like, because unfortunately there's tons of people out there that will burn you.
Yeah, if you think it's painful in the beginning, it's more painful after the fact. So just have the hard conversation up front.
For me, it's just not getting into technology and development sooner. It was something, so my background is not in engineering. I don't have a CS degree or anything, and I think I always had in my head that I'm not, you know, a great person at math. I don't understand, like, I've never taken calculus or anything like that. I couldn't be a software developer. That's not like a career path that I could be successful in. And so if I could go back in time and tell myself, like, no, there are plenty of opportunities for you in this world that don't involve being a mathematician, I really would have loved that advice.
Yeah, the biggest thing for me is just remembering to take care of yourself. If you're feeling really stressed out, you need to know when it's time to take a break or just step away entirely. And I'm getting better at that, but it's definitely taken real world experience to figure out when's that breaking point.
Oh, I think some of my biggest failures are always been around equity. Man, equity is toxic. Like, it messes with startups really bad, right? Like, if you're an early, first engineer and you get that 1% or 7%, whatever the magic number is, right? Like, wrapping your head around what that could potentially be worth versus what it really is worth, and when you're looking at that startup salary where, maybe you get your 6 figures, right? You're the senior engineer and you get 6 figures, but you don't realize that, like, oh, well, my insurance isn't so good, or, I don't get 401k, so that's a factor in there. So, like, retirement's kind of off the table. So, I'm probably never going to retire, unless this equity vests, right? And that, for the longest time wasn't a problem for me. And then I got older, right? And I was like, wow, how many more of these startups am I going to hustle for? And I think that, protecting your personal finances when you go into these startups and these ventures is important, because it may be one of those silent things that at the end of the day eats at you, where, like, wow, if we don't close this next funding round, I don't know how I'm going to pay the bills. Like, what happens if I have to have surgery, and my appendix ruptures? Am I going to be able to make my house payment or pay my car? So protect your finances. Like, that's been like one of the bigger, I wouldn't say it's as much as a failure, but the equity terms have messed with me, where I can't judge what the equity is worth. And I think that's probably been one of my bigger failures.
All right, cool. So I can't ask that question without answering myself. For me, prior to the company I'm at before, I started a boot camp here in Cincinnati that was, at the time, was one of the largest boot camps in the United States. We had 29 locations all across the U.S. They were piloting one here in Cincinnati. I left a good paying job in an emerging market, left there to go help do this with another guy here that, if you all know Jeff Bay, he's now director of the brandery. So me and him kind of launched this, and here in Cincinnati, first class we had 4, second class we had 9, third class we had 12. Some things happened within the Iron Yard as a company. They got acquired by another larger company. Ended up having to close the Cincinnati market, which was rough for me because I had invested a lot of time, a lot of heart in some of these students that had gone through, and to have to stop that was rough. And I think the problem that I have with it right now is that we were so close, right? We had maybe a couple more months and we would have been able to really scale it here. But now seeing, Tech Elevator succeed and Max IT succeed and what Lambda School is doing, that's probably like, if I would have had 6 more months, we could have really turned around Cincinnati here and changed a lot of people's lives. That biggest failure for me. So I appreciate all you guys sitting here. We've ran a little bit over time. Sorry, Fox. But we will probably all be hanging around for a little bit. If you have questions, feel free to grab us. And then I would highly suggest staying around for the next session. It's going to be killer. I know Fox is one of the smartest people I know and one of the coolest people I know. So hang out for him. He'll be up here in a little bit. Thanks, y'all.